Chapter 41, the book of Genesis, continuing the story of Joseph in Egypt. And this particular chapter outlines the beginning of Joseph's very special relationship with Pharaoh and how he found favor with Pharaoh. Notice that throughout, as we learn about Joseph, that he is within the favor of God. He seeks to do God's will and to have God's will worked in his life. Also notice that never ever does he take credit or get himself puffed up with anything that he is able to accomplish, and that he always gives God the credit and the praise for what has happened, and that is a very good lesson for all of us. Verse 1, and it came to pass at the end of 2 full years that Pharaoh dreamed, and behold, he stood by the river. This would, of course, been the Nile, the lifeblood of Egypt, because it irrigated their crops. And without the Nile in that desert, life would have been impossible. 2, and behold, there came up out of the river 7 well-favored kine, and fat-fleshed, and they fed in a meadow. Now kine, K-I-N-E, those would have been cows, cattle, bovines. 3, and behold, 7 other kine came up after them out of the river, ill-favored, lean-fleshed, and stood by the other kine on the brink of the river. 4, and the ill-favored and lean-fleshed kine did eat up the 7 well-favored and fat kine, so Pharaoh awoke. Now this is an unnatural act, would never have occurred anywhere but a dream. Cannibalism is not a fact among cattle, bovines. In fact, bovines are entirely vegetarian. They do not consume meat of any kind, let alone to indulge in cannibalism. 5, and he slept and dreamed the second time, and behold, 7 ears of corn came up upon one stalk, rank and good. Now, corn is a word here translated into the English meaning grain. It is not the kind of corn that we call corn, because what we call corn in the modern age is a New World plant, unknown until Columbus came to this part of the world. This would be a barley or a wheat. Having 7 ears would have been quite unusual, as the maximum would have been 3. 6, and behold, 7 thin ears, and blasted with the east wind, sprung up after them. That east wind would have been a dry, hot wind blowing off of the Sahara Desert. 7, and the 7 thin ears devoured the 7 rank and full ears. And Pharaoh awoke, and behold, it was a dream. And once again, the thin and the ill-favored devoured the full and well-favored. 8, and it came to pass in the morning that his spirit was troubled, and he sent and called for all the magicians of Egypt and all the wise men thereof, And Pharaoh told them his dream, and there was none that could interpret them unto Pharaoh. And that word for those magicians was called Hartumim. Hartumim. And these persons would have been experts in the occult. They had no, as we know it, no divine power whatever, but simply an understanding of the dark powers. 9. Oh, now, the chief butler, remember in the last chapter that Joseph asked the chief butler when he got a good dream and an interpretation. Joseph said, remember me to Pharaoh. Well, 2 years has passed, and all of a sudden, he is going to remember Joseph to Pharaoh, and very likely because it will make him look good in Pharaoh's eyes. Then spake the chief butler unto Pharaoh, saying, I do remember my faults this day. 10. Pharaoh was wroth with his servants, and put me in ward in the captain of the guard's house, both me and the chief baker. And we dreamed a dream in one night, I and he. We dreamed each man according to the interpretation of his dream. And there was with us a young man, a Hebrew, servant to the captain of the guard, that would have been Potiphar, whom he served. And we told him, and he interpreted to us our dreams, to each man according to his dreams did he interpret. 13. And it came to pass, as he interpreted to us, so it was. Me he restored unto mine office, and him he hanged. Exactly came to pass as this Hebrew predicted. 14. Then Pharaoh sent and called Joseph, and they brought him hastily out of the dungeon, still in the prison now, been there 2 years. And he shaved himself and changed his raiment and came in unto Pharaoh. He did not go in the dirty clothes and the scraggly face hair. He cleaned himself up and made himself very presentable to go before the king. 15. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, I have dreamed a dream, and there is none that can interpret it. And I have heard say of thee that thou canst understand a dream and interpret it. 16. And Joseph answered Pharaoh, saying, It is not in me. God shall give Pharaoh an answer of peace. He gives God the credit. He wants to be sure that Pharaoh understands that it is the great God Almighty who will interpret the dream and not Joseph himself. 17. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, In my dream, behold, I stood upon the bank of the river. 18. And behold, there came up out of the river 7 fat-fleshed kine and well-favored, and they fed in a meadow. 19. And behold, 7 other kine came up after them, poor and very ill-favored and lean-fleshed, such as I never saw in all the land of Egypt for madness. This is unusual. The cattle were usually well fed. 20. And the lean and ill-favored kine did eat up the first 7 fat kine. 21. And when they had eaten them up, it could not be known that they had eaten them. but they were still in ill favored as the beginning. So I awoke. Even after they had eaten the fat, good cows, they were still bony and ill favored. 22. And I saw in my dream, and behold, 7 ears came up in one stalk, full and good. And behold, 23, 7 ears withered, thin and blasted with the east wind, sprung up after them. They've been hit with that hot wind, unable to grow and to develop. 26. And the thin ears devoured the 7 good ears, and I told this unto the magicians, that there was none that could declare it to me. 25. And Joseph said unto Pharaoh, the dream of Pharaoh is one. God hath showed Pharaoh what he is about to do. This is what God is going to do. Joseph is telling this king. 27. And the 7 thin and ill-favored kine that came up after them are 7 years, and the 7 empty years blasted with the east wind shall be 7 years of famine. 28. This is the thing which I have spoken unto Pharaoh. What God is about to do, he showeth unto Pharaoh. He has given you a good warning, Pharaoh. You are going to have 7 good years, and then you are going to have 7 years of famine. Now, this famine is recorded in history, and it occurred about 1717 BC. The famine did actually occur as it was dreamed by Pharaoh. 28. This is the thing which I have spoken unto Pharaoh. What God is about to do, he showeth unto Pharaoh. He has shown Pharaoh, and it is within his will that he has Joseph there, and the dream will be interpreted, and Joseph is going to rise mightily in the kingdom of Egypt. It is God working to bring about his will and to guide these people who are to be the ancestors of the Messiah. 30. And there shall arise after them 7 years of famine, and all the plenty shall be forgotten in the land of Egypt, and the famine shall consume the land, the dry wind off that Sahara. 31. And the plenty shall not be known in the land by reason of that famine following, for it shall be very grievous. It's going to be a hard famine. 32. And for that dream was doubled unto Pharaoh twice. It is because the thing is established by God, and God will shortly bring it to pass. Remember that God always gives a second witness. He gave Pharaoh the second witness, the first the cows, the second the grain. 33. Now therefore let Pharaoh look out a man discreet and wise, and set him over the land of Egypt. Find you someone, Pharaoh, he is saying, who can look over this agriculture during these 7 years of plenty. 34. Let Pharaoh do this, and let him appoint officers over the land, and take up the 5th part of the land of Egypt in the 7 plenteous years, and that would be a tax. tax everything by a fifth. In other words, we're going to lay up some store for the coming famine. 35, and let them gather all the food of those good years that come, and lay up corn under the hand of Pharaoh, and let them keep food in the cities. Let them keep this food prepared and stored. 36, and that food shall be for store to the land against the 7 years of famine which shall be in the land of Egypt, that the land perish not through the famine. Now, that is a method of salvation for these Egyptians. He's saying, store up. And Joseph, throughout the Bible, we have Christ types, and Joseph is a Christ type. And the salvation here for Pharaoh is to get someone smart who can oversee the agriculture during these 7 productive years and make sure it's the very best production, and to save up. And what are we told to do in salvation? We're told to store ourselves up a place in heaven and to work toward a reward and a plenty that is beyond our life here on earth. 37. And the thing was good in the eyes of Pharaoh, in the eyes of all his servants. They liked the idea. 38. And Pharaoh said unto his servants, can we find such a one as this, a man in whom the Spirit of God is? He recognizes that the Spirit of God is working through Joseph, even though he's a sun worshiper and a pagan. 39. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, forasmuch as God hath showed thee all this, there is none so discreet and wise as thou art. 40. Thou shalt be over my house, and according unto thy word shall all my people be ruled. Only in the throne will I be greater than thou. He has put this little Hebrew slave boy out of the prison and second in charge of the entire land. 41. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, see, I have set thee over all the land of Egypt. 42. And Pharaoh took off his ring from his hand and put it on Joseph's hand, and arrayed him in vestures of fine linen, and put a gold chain about his neck. Now that ring was important. That ring bore a signet. That ring would be impressed into some hot wax on an important paper, an important communication. In other words, it was the very seal and signature of the king, and it's been given to Joseph. 43. And he made him to ride in the second chariot which he had, and they cried before him, bow the knee, abrik is that word, bow the knee, abrik. And he made him ruler over all the land of Egypt. 44. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, I am Pharaoh, and without thee shall no man lift up his hand or foot in all the land of Egypt. In other words, no one is to come against you, Joseph. And Pharaoh called Joseph's name Zanath-Paaneah, Prince of Life. Sounds rather like the Prince the Savior who will be coming to save the entire world and not just some Egyptians from a famine. And he gave him to wife Asenath, the daughter of Potipharah, priest of Oz. This is a part of Lower Egypt, and she came from what was considered the priest's line in her land. And Joseph went out over all the land of Egypt. He traveled in this second chariot, and all cried out, bowed the knee, and recognized him as the second in charge of the entire country. 46. And Joseph was 30 years old when he stood before Pharaoh, king of Egypt. And Pharaoh went out from the presence of, and Joseph went out from the presence of Pharaoh and went throughout all of the land of Egypt. And he would have been about 13 years old when his brothers put him in that pit and then sold him to those Ishmaelites who took him down to Egypt. 47. And in the 7 plenteous years, the earth brought forth by handfuls, very much harvest. 48. And he gathered up all the food of the 7 years which were in the land of Egypt, and laid up the food in the cities, the food of the field, which was round about every city, laid he up in the same storehouses of this bumper grain crop during the 7 years of prosperity. 49. And Joseph gathered corn as the sand of the sea, very much until he left numbering, for it was without number. The grain was so great that it could not even be counted. 50. And unto Joseph were born 2 sons before the years of the famine came, which Asenath, the daughter of Potipharah, priest of Oz, bare unto him. 51. And Joseph called the name of the firstborn Manasseh. For God, he said, hath made me forget all my toil and my father's house. And that name Manasseh means forgetful. And the name of the second called Ephraim, for God hath caused me to be fruitful in the land of my affliction. And that word means fruitful. And later, these two were, remember, Joseph is one of the 12 patriarchs, one of the 12 that would become the 12 tribes. And as he did not get his share, these 2 sons, Manasseh and Ephraim, get his share, and they were called the half-tribe of Manasseh and the half-tribe of Ephraim. And they were part of those 10 northern tribes who were the first taken away into captivity by the Assyrians. In fact, that entire 10 tribes are often called Ephraim in the scriptures. 53. And the 7 years of plenteousness that was in the land of Egypt was ended. 54. And the 7 years of dearth began to come according as Joseph had said, and the dearth was in all lands, but all the land of Egypt there was bread. All around that entire area, famine, likely no rain, and hot desert winds. But they had bread in Egypt because they had stored up from the great years of plenty, and they had plenty of grain to feed the people bread. 55. And when all the land of Egypt was famished, the people cried to Pharaoh for bread. And Pharaoh said unto the Egyptians, Go unto Joseph, what he saith to you do. 56. And the famine was over all the face of the earth, and Joseph opened all the storehouses and sold unto the Egyptians, and the famine waxed sore in the land of Egypt, but they had grain to buy. 57. And all countries came into Egypt to Joseph to buy corn, because that the famine was sore in all of the lands. Chapter 51, chapter 41, the book of Genesis.